Swayam Prabha. Digital India. Educated India.
Welcome to the Module 4 of Urban Land Use and Transportation Planning course. In this module, we will cover microsimulation and population synthesis. And as you understand, for synthesizing population for an urban area, we first need to understand how the demographic transition is taking place for that particular urban area, what is the projected population for that particular area, and then we can synthesize the population for that urban area. So, in lecture 16, we are covering demographic transition. The different concepts that would be covered in this particular lecture are demographic indicators, demographic transition, 5 stages of demographic transition, effect and also the effect of age structure on phases of demographic transition. Hauser and Duncan defined demography as the study of the size, territorial distribution and composition of population, changes therein and the components of such changes. What it means is demography is not only the study of the total population, but how it is spread over a particular area and the total composition of the population, and we can always divide the population into different components such as based on gender, based on the different age groups, or even based on income pattern, income of the different households. We can divide the population in a 2-dimensional way or a 3-dimensional way. For example, we have each group is for each particular income category, we have a particular age group, and then also we look into the gender. So, we are considering 3 components. So, it's a 3-dimensional way of categorizing the population. Or if I look into just age and sex, then it's a 2-dimensional way of categorizing the population. So, the study of demography is not only determines the total population at a certain point of time and its composition, but also how it changes over time. That means how the different all these groups or the composition of these groups changes over time, and what are the effects of these changes. These are also studied in demography. So, there are different ways to model this change, and we can go for one-sex modeling, where we consider fertility and nuptiality of women, and we can say that the amount of new births based on marriages of women, and from that we can estimate the new population that is going to that will determine the growth of that particular area. So, similarly, we can also look into mortality based models, where both the sexes are considered, and mortality rate of women is lower than men, but both the rates are considered, and we determine after a particular time period how much is the what is the survival rate of a particular age group or a age and gender group, and then accordingly we can decide on the future population. So, so not only the different this mortality and fertility based models, both of these are we are talking about certain demographic indicators such as fertility or mortality, and as you can see that all these indicators changes with different ages. That means the likelihood of a person who is of a older age to die is more compared to a person of younger age. So, we can say that likelihood of an event occurring changes with the age of an individual, or we can also call it as age gradient of various life events. That means mortality, fertility, all this changes as per the age group in which the population is currently in. Demographic transition of an individual and a society are both important in urban planning. So, we know, so not only how a particular individual is changing from one age group to another after a certain period of time, but how the entire society is moving and what implications does it have in urban planning, both are important. And demographic transition of a society is closely linked to migration and economic development. That means as per the demographic pattern of a particular society, it influences the migration to that particular area, because different demographic structures indicate different kinds of economic development or different kinds of activity rates in a particular population. So, first we will discuss about some demographic indicators, and these indicators are ways to define different aspects of demography. And for example, the crude birth rate or CBR, it is defined as the total number of live births per 1,000 population per time period. Now, this time period could be a decade, or it could be a particular year, or it could be as per the particular study that we are undertaking. And we take mid-year population, means within a time period we have to take the value at the middle of that time period, whichever is the number of or the average value for that particular mid-year period would be taken, so that we can so total number of live births per 1,000 population per time period is the total number of live births at around in the mid-year period. Similarly, general fertility rate (GFR) is birth rate of women of childbearing age is estimated as the number of live births during a year divided by mid-year female population of 15 to 45 years in the same year into 1,000. So here also you see that birth rate of women of childbearing age, that means the number of births a woman have during the childbearing age, which is 15 to 45 years, and we take again the mid-year female population for that particular year, and then again we multiply with 1,000. Now, similarly, similar to general fertility rate, we also have marital fertility rate, which is only considered where only married women are considered. Then comes age-specific fertility rate (ASFR), where number of live births in a particular age group per mid-year population of the same age group into 1,000. So again, number of live births in each age group is considered, and we also consider the mid-year population of the same age group, because the population may fluctuate during the entire year, and again we multiply by 1,000. And similarly, we can also have age-specific marital fertility rate. So that again it means that we only consider this for married women. And then total fertility rate TFR, where it is defined as the number of children who would be born per woman, or it could be per 1,000 women, if she or they were to pass through the childbearing years, bearing children according to a current schedule of age-specific fertility rates. For different age groups, we have different fertility rates. That means a woman at the age of 15 and the woman at the age of 45 will have different fertility rates. And when a woman passes through the entire childbearing years, starting from 15 to 45, without and the woman is surviving during the entire period, the total number of children who could be born during that period is the total fertility rate. And then comes infant mortality rate, that is number of deaths per 1,000 live births of children under 1 year of age. And then life expectancy (LE) is the average time a person is expected to live based on the year of birth, current age, gender and other demographic factors. Then gross reproduction rate GRR, this is average number of daughters a woman would give birth to while surviving all through her childbearing years, considering the age-specific fertility rate and sex ratio at birth for that period. So what it means is there going to be enough daughters who can replace their mothers? So this is a measure to determine if the society or if that particular population is having enough number of daughters so that the future population growth is ensured. So that is gross reproduction rate, and here again we consider that the woman goes through the entire childbearing years and survives during this entire period. Whereas in net reproduction rate, we only consider the actual years of a woman's survival, because because of mortality rate also in different age groups have got different mortality rates. Not all women will survive throughout this particular time period, that is from 15 to 45 years. Then looking at mortality, mortality refers to the number of deaths in a given time or a place, or a proportion of deaths in relation to a particular population. Some examples of mortality are crude death rate, infant mortality rate, maternal mortality rate, and life expectancy. So these are some of the parameters of, or some of the ways mortality is estimated. Then morbidity, sometimes we can also estimate morbidity, which is important in studies where we try to determine, okay, what is the number of days a person loses work because of falling sick and so on. So this refers to the diseases and illnesses, injuries and other disabilities in a population. So we can understand what is the likelihood that a population will be sick for a certain amount of time. So that is morbidity. And then comes the different migration indicators, like crude in-migration rate, or which is also called immigration rate, which is number of in-migrants per 1,000 population. Crude out-migration rate or emigration rate, which is number of out-migrants per 1,000 population. Then crude gross migration rate, this is the sum of crude in-migration and out-migration rate. And then crude net migration rate, which is difference between crude in-migration and out-migration rate. Then once we know both the mortality, the fertility, and then the migration rates, we can determine crude rate of natural increase, and also the total overall population growth rate. And crude rate of natural increase, CRNI, is defined as the difference between the crude birth rate and the crude death rate. That means if the crude death rate is higher, that means the population would be declining. If the growth birth rate is higher, then the population would be growing. And then overall population growth rate is the sum of crude rate of natural increase and crude net migration rate. So that means we take both migration and the natural increase to determine the overall population growth rate for an urban area. Then looking into migration, migration also varies with age. That means at different age groups, people from different age groups are more likely to have different rates of migration. For example, a person who is at an age group of around 24 to 35 or 25 to 35, he has a more likely chance of migrating to a new area. So these are the we need to have age specific migration rates. So number of out migrants of an age group per 1,000 population of that age group during a particular period is the age specific out migration rate. So similarly, we can have in migration rates also as per the different demographic or different population groups. And migrant population also goes through the same demographic experiences like births, deaths, etc. So when we are estimating total population of a particular area, and if we are dividing the existing population into different age and gender groups, then similarly the migrant population also needs to be taken through the same processes. So when we are estimating these values for a certain time period, for example 10 years, and we are having a certain amount of migration coming to a particular urban area, we assume that we take the average of that time period, and we say that the migrant population, we say that population projection for these migrants are estimated for the half of this time period. Why? Because we assume that some of them have come at the beginning, some of them have come at the end. So we take average of them, and we said that the entire population is arrived at the middle, and based on that we can do statistical or mathematical calculations. Total fertility rate of 2.1 is known as replacement level fertility in low mortality countries, and what it means is in low mortality countries where the death rate is low, if a fertility rate of 2.1 is minimum required to replace the existing population. In high mortality countries, we require a higher fertility rate. Now, when we are talking about demographic, the different parameters of demography or different indicators of demography, this involves a particular population group or even a particular individual. But when we look at entire society, we also need to see how the demographic transition takes place in a society and how it affects that particular society, because that will also decide on the future population growth rate for that or future population of that particular society. So this is explained in the demographic transition theory, and demographic transition theory was proposed by the American demographer Warren Thompson in 1929, and this was extended. His work was extended by Adolphe Landry of France during 1934. And this theory explains that the changes in a country's demography, society, and economy is based on the relationship between birth rate CBR and the death rate CDR. So that means based on the birth rate and death rate of a particular area, or a urban area or a rural area, or for a particular country, the demography pattern of the country, the society, and different aspects of society, economy is actually influenced from this birth rate and death rate. And extending this particular theory, all the countries experiences this change in the demographic pattern or the population structure because of the difference in birth rate and death rate at different periods, and because of this particular transition, all countries experiences these changes and at different rate, but they experience these changes at different rate. For example, like in this particular picture, in this particular figure, you can see that this black line is the death rate and this green line is the birth rate. Initially, both birth rate and in the first phase or the stage 1, birth rate and death rate is more or less similar or fluctuating. Sometimes birth rate is higher, sometimes death rate is higher, and the population is more or less stable. And the population is at a lower level actually. And then the birth rate is actually coming down, death rate is actually coming down, and the birth rate is more or less stable in stage 2. Here we see the population has started to grow, and then again the same pattern continues, but we see the birth rate is coming down a little bit, and then again the population is still going on, but the rate of growth is now coming down, and then in stage 4 the rate almost stagnates, and finally in stage 5 we see that the rate is more or less, it is declining to some extent. Based on as we can see, the birth rate has fallen down below the death rate, that's why population is declining. If it would have gone like this, then the population would also have start to increase again. So more or less this transition, that first initially death rate and birth rate is both high, and then death rate falls down, and then birth rate also falls down. So this transition pattern is experienced by most of the countries. But the speed of this transition, in some cases it has taken around for a country to go through these phases for around 200 years, whereas many economies in Asia and all has gone through these phases in a much smaller time period. So this, but still all countries has to go through these particular phases. So there are 4 recognized phases mostly till this part. But recently, the 5th stage is also introduced by some demographers, where we say that there may be a permanent fall in the death rate, or there could be a situation where the population is either increasing, or there could be a situation where a population is actually falling. Depends on both the birth rate and the fertility rate. So to explain these 5 stages in detail, we can say that, and how it influences society, we can say that in the first stage, which is a low growth phase, the birth rate is both birth rate and death rate is very high, and this is primarily we see this in a pre-industrial society. There is limited food supply, so that's why there is competition for food, and there is higher mortality rates and all, and also similarly because of higher mortality and the birth rate is also to some extent low because of all the hardship that is there in the society. So this is the first stage, and then we have got the high growth stage, that is when CDR goes down while CBR stays the same. That means birth rate more or less stays the same, whereas the death rate is actually coming down. And here we see gradual improvement in food supply, gradual improvement in sanitation. Societies are going towards the industrial revolution. That means the society is being industrialized. The society also learns new farming techniques for producing more amount of food. Female literacy starts, and health education also starts in the society. So this is a high growth phase when the population starts to grow and the population is more or less stable. Then comes the phase of moderate growth, where we see drop in the CBR and CDR both, and the gap in between these two starts reducing. And here we see more amount of urbanization. That means the society is progressing, more amount of female participating in the workforce. So that's why, because females are participating in the workforce, we see a little bit drop in the birth rate as well. So this is the moderate growth phase. And then comes the low growth phase, which most societies are going through right now in the developed world, where CBR equals CDR. That means the birth rate and death rate birth rate has fallen down to a point where it matches the death rate. And this could be said that there are problems of obesity in the society, and the shrinking, and the population is more or less shrinking. So that this is what could be observed because of this the lower values of CBR and CDR. And finally, in the fifth phase, which is the extension of the fourth phase, we may see a higher CDR than CBR, and which will lead to an irreversible population decline. But opposite can also happen in some societies based on whatever policies the societies has adopted. That means if the society recognize this as a problem and can increasingly adopt policies which can reverse this, in that case the CBR can actually increase. So this is we can, if CDR, if this is not reversing, then we can attribute this to population, lifestyle changes, lower birth rates, but both can happen. That means if a society can also replenish this loss by taking certain measures. And so the pessimistic view is below replacement fertility levels. That means we have attained a fertility level which cannot replace the population, so the population is on a permanent decline. Or there could be an optimistic view where we can say there is when this kind of situation is faced by a society, it takes some measures and fertility increases, and then again we can return to a situation of higher growth. Now this theory only talks about the change in birth rate and death rate, and how it influences the society, or how it influences the entire demographic structure. Whereas some demographers also argue that effect of age structure, the age structure also play a big role in demographic transition. So what it means is changes in age structure of a population influences economic and social development, and is not a new phenomena. And as I was saying, that this has been these phases of transition has last even 200 years, and like the phenomena of population aging, and where industrialist countries above shows population above 60 years of age, where most of the population is above 60 years of age, or China is showing rapid fall in fertility rates. So this population aging, because old people are increasing in society, we are seeing increase of so that is old age dependency rates are increasing, and this leads to labor shortages and also inability to finance social security and old age care. That means the number of people supporting the older age groups are lower. So there is a problem with financing, because these are the young people are paying taxes, and there is a problem of having enough amount of money to finance the social security and the old age care and this kind of services that the society provides to its entire population, and particularly in this particular case to the older population. So there will be problems in this. So more number of people in the higher age group, that means in the older age groups, lead to this kind of societal problems. So accordingly, we can say that the society, the transition, like the previous one, if we say that the transition is not only as per high birth rate or death rate or the variations of that, we can also say the society transitions in form of there is a child phase, there is a young adult phase, then there is a phase of population maturity, and then there is a phase of aging. And demographic transition influences both age structure and population growth. So, in the child phase, that is at the beginning, that is almost like a pre-industrial society as we are discussing, where both birth rates and death rates were high, and then gradually the death rate starts decreasing. So, the number of children starts increasing in this particular society, and after 30 to 40 years with fertility remaining unchanged, the population age-sex pyramid shows a concave shape. So, that means when I have a population pyramid, it will look something like this. So, that means there are more number of people in the lower age groups and smaller number of people in the higher age groups. So, that is the population age-sex pyramid takes a concave shape. And so, this happens after 30-40 years, but again this number of years may be different for different geographies or different countries and so on. And as the number of children is more, consumption exceeds the production capacity, because there is few number of people working over here. So, they are supporting the entire population. So, consumption exceeds production capacity. High child dependency rate, population under 18 years divided by 18 to 64 years of population is actually this rate is pretty high, and women spends most of the time in child bearing and also child rearing. So, they are mostly limited to household activities. Then widespread poverty, child labor may also result from during this phase, and exploitation of natural resources starts happening. Forest land and also gets exploited, and there is lot of intense land reclamation. That means the society is or this particular country is trying to reclaim land where maybe agriculture and other industries are being set up. So, the society is working towards providing for itself, and foreign capitals and imports are also very, very low. So, this was India during the 1960s. So, this is the child phase. And similarly, in the next phase, we can call it a young adult phase. Here we see decreasing fertility rate. That means the increasing fertility rate of yesterday's is now coming down, and total number of births reduces. Now we can see increasing participation of women in the labor force, and that is also a cause of the lower fertility rates and all. The base of the pyramid gets narrower and shows a convex shape. That means now the pyramids become something like this. It could become something like this. So, that means now the births are lower over here. This is the age-sex pyramid. So, these are the two genders, on this is male, this is female. We can see in the lower age groups, and these are age groups. In the lower age groups, we can see less number of births, but over here this births is now moved into as now transitions towards the towards this part, because after 20-30 years the society has moved to this particular point. So, here we see a bulging in the age-sex pyramid. So, a population bulge and also it takes a convex shape. The population bulge is at the young adult age group. So, this is young adult age group. So, there the bulge takes place. Young population is willing to work. They are willing to work even at lower wages. This leads to agricultural transformation, liberalization, immigration, urbanization, industrialization, railway building, and so on. So, this kind of activities takes place, and because there is a lot of young people, they are also asking for their rights. So, democratization takes place, and the state also becomes more and the state also intervenes into the life of the people by providing certain facilities and all. So, we can say gradually we are moving to a so we are moving to a welfare state system. And then this leads to there is overpopulation, low wage rate, low savings, low living standards during this particular years, because we are still the total number of people that has to be supported is still on a higher side. So, this was Germany during 1870s to 1930s. So, you can see that this is a pretty long phase of 60 years, and China during 1965 to 1995, this is around 30 years. So, this is a much shorter phase. So, then comes the population maturity phase. So, this young adults now moves on, and then they become matured, and the population bulge gradually rises up the entire age structure. The middle age group is now the biggest bulge, and this is a period of sustained growth because middle-aged people, they have experience, they have also connections and so on. There is adequate labor supply. So because of adequate labor supply, women can also, and because there is adequate people are earning good wages, women can go back to child rearing and domestic activities. Some amount of reduction in the number of women engaged in offices or working in the different sectors. Then there is higher savings. Saving pattern also changes from housing to financial assets. People instead of buying houses now buys secures financial assets, and then this is the most prosperous stage, and gradually the country is transforming into an industrialized state. So this was Korea from 1960s onwards, and Brazil, Colombia and China from 1985-90 onwards. So this is the maturity phase. This is the best phase, I would say, because this is the most prosperous phase, and this is when cities or countries become industrialized or they become developed. So then comes the phase of aging, where there is decline in economic growth because of lowering of per capita income growth, not because people have aged, so they cannot actively participate in the workforce, and so productivity growth is now low. Rate of capital formation in business is also lower. So this also increases long-term interest rates, and then growing public expenditure and budget deficits, because government has to spend more on supporting all this the different kinds of social services for old people and other population groups. Then increase in spending for old age care and services. Women's labor force participation also increases. Discontent arising from tax and other issues. So this phase is almost similar to the first phase, where due to there we had high dependency rate of younger people, then we had here high dependency rate of older population. That means more number of older people has to be supported. So again, the young working age population has to work more, women has to also get into the work, and so on. So this is true for many Japan and many European nations. So here in these figures we can see that in the first figure over here, this is the period of rapid growth, the first phase, where like in Afghanistan in the year 2000, you can see that most of the population is in the lower age groups, and then the upper age groups there is very few population. And then this is Mexico in 2000. This is showing during moderate growth during this time period, where we can see that the population bulge is gradually moving upwards. So there is more number of people in the younger age groups, like around 20 to 24, 15 to 19, there is a lot of people. Then the period of slow growth, so that means we have a bulge in the middle age population for both male and female. So this is United States in the year 2000. And then there is population decline phase, when we can see maximum this bulge is going up, and we see that the older age, there is a huge amount of people in the older ages as well. So this is Italy in 2000. So similarly, if I look in India, if I compare the case of India and China, we can see the most of the demographic dividend, we call it, that is most of the people, we see the maximum number of people in the age groups of around 20 to 14. So this is the area, this is the age groups where most of our population is concentrated in India, whereas in China we can see that the bulge is over here and here. So they are somewhere in between the moderate growth phase and the slow growth phase. So this is where China is. So we can see that China's demographic dividend is more or less at a position where it is gradually declining. So we would have more number of people in the senior age groups in China in the coming years. So this is how we can compare the demographic transition between two countries, and this actually gives us an idea how the society will grow, what would be the different economic development in society, what could be the kind of changes the society. So demographic transition can also tell us about the changes that is forthcoming in the society as well, and how it is related with population growth and so on. So to summarize this discussion, we can say population growth affects the ratio of working age population to to dependent population, which in turn affects economic growth. So, the ratio of working age population to dependent population, this is very, very important. So, we can see in this particular figure, this is the growth rate. So, initially growth rate is, growth is less, then growth increases, then growth falls down, and we can see similarly the share of working age population is actually stable, then it comes down a bit because there is more growth, and then it picks up because the demographic dividend we call it, that is that bulge, the population bulge is actually moving on, and then they are moving on, this increases the share of the working population, then it reaches a stage when it is maximum, and then it starts falling down, which again leads to a lot of problem in this particular area. So, ratio of working age population to dependent population is very, very important. Then population growth improves longevity, and when longevity is improved, it has got a negative effect on the economic growth because of reasons like elderly support. Then decline in mortality has no effect on economic growth, which we thought that when mortality declined, then there is an effect of economic growth as per the previous theories, but here we can see there is actually none, because there is no change in the ratio of economically active population to dependents. And then rise in fertility and population growth has got a negative effect on the economic growth, more because of more persons to feed. It's in the short term, but it's a positive influence in the long term when we will have more working population in the future years. So, rise in fertility is not negative, it's both positive as well as negative during different time periods. The benefits of middle phase of transition may or may not be realized. That means this demographic dividend that we call, refer to this middle phase of transition, that is where we have this bulk population, that bulge population, when it moves into the middle ages, that actually leads to a lot of economic development for a country. But depending on the social, economic and the political environment of an area, this benefit may or may not be realized for a particular country. So, these are the references that you can study. And to conclude this particular lecture, we can say demographic indicators help us to analyze demographic transition more objectively. While population growth rate influences economic growth as suggested by both population pessimists and optimists, age structure and particularly working age population plays a big role. Population age-sec pyramids can help us to understand the likely demographic, social and economic changes for an urban area, and demographic transitions takes place over several decades. However, this time period varies in different geographies and societies. Thank you.